Hello, everyone. Today, we are looking at a breakthrough that could significantly change post operative care after complex abdominal and liver surgeries. Researchers at Indian Institute of Science, working with surgeons from Aster CMI Hospital, have developed a dissolvable biodegradable stent designed to keep bile ducts open during healing without requiring a second procedure for removal. The innovation known as the Asthana stent could lower complications, reduce patient discomfort, and ease hospital burden, especially in resource constrained healthcare settings. I'm Dr. Anubha Jain, senior journalist with ETV Bharat, and today I will speak with Dr. Sonal Asthana from Aster Hospital and Professor Kaushik Chatterjee from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore about the science behind this innovation, the surgical need it addresses, and what it could mean for patients if it clears a regulatory approval. Welcome to ETV, both of you. So,
Thank you.
at what point, sir, Dr. Asthana, I want to know, or with Chatterjee, sir, at what point did you realize that a collaboration is needed and this was no longer just a clinical idea or an engineering concept, but a medical solution that could actually scale?
So essentially, as you mentioned, I'm a liver transplant surgeon. So this is a point that often came to us because while we operate on extremely complex patients, there are certain problems which are actually, in fact, engineering problems, where we know that despite us being very precise in our measurements and joining blood vessels and bile ducts together, there is a small percentage of people that will undergo certain complications. And this is particularly true for transplantation because one of the Achilles heels of this very complex operation is the biliary healing. Bile duct problems can occur in almost 25% of all the patients we operate on. So this was actually a genuine pain point that we were trying to find a solution to. So essentially, as a liver transplant surgeon, one of the things that we are aware of is that there are certain engineering limitations to what we can do because we work with very, very small blood vessels as well as bile ducts to join them to make liver transplants work. And there is a percentage of people who will develop complications. And particularly when it comes to the bile duct, almost 25% of people may develop some sorts of problems with their bile duct. So that is actually the Achilles heel of the entire transplant operation. This is the pain point that every transplant surgeon is aware of in the world. And there are some solutions that exist for it. We normally use a plastic tube, which is deployed at the time of operation or after the operation, which may require two or three procedures in order to insert or to replace it. So the idea about using something that would help the healing process then dissolve and be removed after that was something that was germinating when the collaboration with Professor Chatterjee's lab started. This was regarding a few of the other exciting projects that their lab is working on. So I would say that it was a fairly organic, discussion, and over multiple discussions, we realized that there is something that needs to be done for it. So, I mean, I was quite naive in that I thought that it was a very simple problem, but then the real complex work was done actually at Professor Chatterjee's lab with some very excellent PhD students, Saswat and Thaseeb right now, which was well supervised by himself. Because during this process, I think that I learned a lot more about materials and about how devices are created in our country and licensed in our country than perhaps even they did from me actually. So that was the point from the clinical point. But I mean, obviously, I'd like to hear what Professor Chatterjee has to say.
Yeah, please, sir, if you like to add anything.
Yes. So I think we are at the Indian Institute of Science, which many of you may know is 100+ years old institution, which has been at the forefront of science and engineering for decades or more than a century now. So, but aside from doing fundamental research, I think there's a growing interest in trying to address clinical problems or societal problems at large. And it's in that context that we've been interacting quite a bit with clinicians such as Dr. Asthana here, and him being here in Bangalore has helped us interact quite a bit. And over the years, what we tried to do was to get him to place to us or put forward, like he said, the pain points to our team and say, what is it that the surgeons face or, for which they don't have easy solutions? And then as an engineering lab, what can we do to address them? I think that's how this whole conversation or collaboration started. And so once that had been identified by him that, yes, this is where there could be significant impact. And also there are no easy solutions or well accepted solutions in the clinic at the moment. We started working on this. And of course, all this kind of research takes time. And eventually we've developed this prototype where the problem statement comes from the clinician, but then there is an engineering team trying to address these requirements.
Okay. So, Dr. Asthana, I want to know what recurring post-operative complication in liver transplant patients first convinced you that a dissolvable stent was urgently needed?
As I said, the liver transplant is an extremely successful operation. There are some patients who are extremely sick because of liver failure. As you know, that liver failure doesn't have the advantages perhaps that a renal failure patient has, where dialysis is possible. So these patients come to us in a very sick stage with no other solution that can be made, that can be sort of implemented. So liver transplants are have a 90% plus success rate. But that being said, when we are operating on sick patients, there is definitely the possibility of morbidity and complications. So one of the big problems that we face is this particular anastomosis or the joint that is called the biliary joint, where the bile duct of the liver graft is joined to the bile duct of the recipient, the person who's getting the liver. And because of various reasons, mainly some of which are technical, some of which are because of the blood vessel supply, the vascular supply to the bile duct, the healing for the bile duct is a little bit different as compared to some of the other parts of the body. This is one of the reasons why the bile duct is a little bit more prone to developing leaks and narrowings, which are called strictures. So this is something that is known well across the world. There have been many attempts at solutions for this, but there has been no solution that is durable and endures. So the only solution, unfortunately, to patients who develop these problems is a series of repeated interventions by endoscopy called ERCPs, which will need sometimes 2 or 3 or even more attempts at changing the stents which are placed inside the bile duct. So I think from that perspective, as Professor Chatterjee has already said, a pain point, at least in this particular domain, was quite well established. We knew exactly that what was the problem that was what we wanted to solve. So when we started interacting with the engineering department led by Professor Chatterjee, we were able to tell them that this is the kind of solution that we want, in terms of the material, in terms of the shape, and in terms of the deployability. So, of course, that having a sort of a clear problem statement is extremely important when it comes to interaction, because we don't speak the same language. They're a engineering department, we're a medical department. So I think that definitely establishing some very fundamental common rules of engagement of what precisely the problem is helps in collaborative efforts such as this.
Professor Kaushik, if I ask, many medical devices succeed in the lab but struggle in clinical translation. So, what did it take to make this stent manufacturable, reproducible, and surgeon friendly?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, I think it's still not being manufactured at scale because that's the next step actually where we have partnered with a company in India to do that. But I think two things. I would like to say that oftentimes research is done on technologies which are sound or which are fancy, or I would say very exciting, but nevertheless they are not perhaps the most pressing need in the clinic. And also, again, Dr. Asthana is a expert clinician, but my impression of interacting with a lot of clinicians is that what happens is when we as engineers come up with a solution, the clinicians are hesitant to take it up, and in a way, rightly so, because medicine as a field is conservative. Where something is being done, people don't want to disturb whatever is the current practice. So I think what is essential in all of this is to have the right clinical input right from the beginning, so that the problem itself is getting defined in collaboration with the clinician, and the solution is being developed right from ground zero up as you're building it up, that it's it's, it has that constant clinical input, because ultimately you'll come up with a solution for which there is no problem. So you want to have the right balance of engineering, and the medical need. And I think that's very important. And of course, very importantly, you must also identify where there is a business case to be made, because maybe you've come up with a very exquisite solution for a problem which doesn't affect sufficient number of people, or there's not enough of a market for it. Then commercialization may be hampered, or I would say at least not attractive to many of these companies, because all of this requires a lot of resources, requires time. So I think it's ultimately a balance between the clinical needs, the optimal engineering solution, and the business case that has to be, have to all come together so that the business is, or I would say the product is successful.
Right. In continuation to this, if I ask the biggest engineering challenge in designing a stent that remains stable during healing, so yet predictably dissolve inside the body. So, what was that biggest engineering challenge, if you ask any one of you?
I think, I mean, in any of this, I think it's always a combination of two things. So one is the right material, because you want it to degrade or dissolve, but not too soon, but also not take forever, because then also it doesn't help. But at the same time, even if you found the material, say you did find something that you can place inside the bile duct will survive, but then the challenge is how you fabricate it into a tube. And in this case, it's not trivial, because you're talking about a small diameter tube, only a few millimeters in diameter. And the wall thickness is also maybe 1 millimeter, or at most, 1.5 millimeters in diameter. So now, to be able to take a material which has the right sort of compatibility in your body, the ability to degrade, have the right mechanical properties, identifying all of this combination in a material is one challenge. And then the ability to combine it with a fabrication technology so that you get the right shape and size of the device is the other challenge. And ultimately, a lot of this would require a combination of things, that it may not be one material. Maybe you have to mix two materials together to get you the right properties. Similarly, one standard fabrication technology may not suffice. You may have to use a combination of fabrication technologies to be able to get to that final shape and size that you require. I think this is what even we encountered initially. Some of the trials that we did in animal models, we found that what looked good in the lab was, when we took it to the animal, it just miserably failed. But that, I think the failure gave us that important knowledge on what to, sort of improvise, or where the innovation would lie. And that is the next iteration. We were much more successful, and we were able to overcome those challenges.
Right. So, Dr. Asthana, if I ask, how does avoiding a second procedure to remove the stent change outcomes for patients and surgeons?
Quite significantly. I think that when you look at it from a patient's perspective, if they've undergone, say, a big operation where which is essentially life altering, and then they are in a situation where they have to come in again and again to the hospital for repeated admissions, repeated anesthesia, repeated procedures in order to change any such things such as a stent. It really adds to the morbidity of the patient experience. They we may have saved their lives and given them a new liver, but they would not necessarily feel that they are able to make the most out of it. So I think that in terms of both, in terms of patient morbidity, patient cost, and repeated hospitalizations that are required, it is very, very desirable to avoid that as fast as possible. So, and fortunately, technology exists that will allow us to do that. As Dr. Kaushik had alluded to earlier, medicine is quite conservative, because a lot of the solutions that we use are solutions that we've used for 10, 20 years, because we are very comfortable with them. They work well. and there's a lot of familiarity with the techniques. But that being said, a lot of the innovations that are coming in medicine right now are coming, say, from aerospace medicine or from materials engineering, where materials or alloys that are designed for spacecraft are being used for joint replacement, for example. So I think that there is a lot of learning that we need to be obviously with our minds about new materials as well, and collaborations such as these are the only way in which we move forward, because as clinicians or as surgeons, we are not aware of the cutting edge of material engineering, for example. And often material scientists are not available of what the pain points are. So unless that dialogue is established over a period of time, over a sustained period of time, solutions like this will not emerge.
Sir, if I ask this stent be adapted for other surgical applications beyond bile duct repair, would that be possible?
Yes, actually, it will be, because we have essentially been looking at stents. We started at stents, at looking at stents from a purely biliary perspective, but then we realized that a lot of the engineering challenges and the material challenges are also true for other joints that we make in the body. For example, for pancreatic surgery, for urological surgery such as in the ureter or in the urinary bladder. So there is a huge requirement for stents that would probably do the job inside the body and dissolve when the job is done. Because right now, if you look at it, right, starting from the head to the toe, there are multiple such interventions where we actually put in tubes for a defined period and then they take them out. And of course, those tubes have complications. Every time you have a plastic piece in your body, there's a risk of infection coming in as well. So I think that while our particular product or innovation can currently look at problems such as problems in the liver, the biliary, the pancreas, and the ureters. But solutions such as these will be required eventually for a large variety of uses.
Okay, right.
And
So,
in fact, I want
yeah.
to just add to that from an engineering perspective. I think a lot of opportunities to look at this new generation of devices that will hopefully hit the clinics in coming years, where you're not looking to have these permanent devices in the body, uh, especially when you're looking at short-term, medium-term requirements. Of course, these days what has become common is these sutures, where you get stitches done. Earlier, you would hear people saying, "Okay, I need to go and get my stitches cut." But these days, you don't have to, because they get resolved in your body. But I think that is what is hopefully coming, in the years ahead of us, where many of these devices don't have to be taken out, or they don't have to permanently stay in your body. It could be a stent. It could be, even say a fracture fixation plate. You fall down, you break your hand or leg, and instead of putting a piece of metal there that stays with you your lifetime, or do a second surgery to take it out, what if you could have something that would help fix the fracture, but after several months gets cleared out of your body? So a lot of research and development is happening in India and around the world in these areas. And of course, it takes time for these things to become reliable for clinical use. But I think we will see more of these technologies hitting the clinic in coming years.
Right. So, related to this, as the device moves up towards approval from the Central Drug Standard Control Organization and the Indian Council of Medical Research, so what clinical evidences will be most critical before surgeons adopt it routinely? Dr. Asthana, if you like to add.
I think that this follows a very predictable process, as you've clearly said, a device adoption. One is testing out the physical properties of the device that we make. We are using clinically approved materials in particular blends, as Dr. Kaushik has suggested. We need to test them quite extensively in the lab for physical characteristics, safety, and stability. After which these devices are tested in human fluids, such as bile, for example, to look at their degradation process. Then the next step is animal trials, where we actually deploy these devices in animals to see how they degrade, how they behave, and then we also have the opportunity to test them out and using the histopathology to make sure that they're not having any allergic reactions, for example, because these are things that the safety studies are fairly extensively required. Then the next step, of course, is coming to human trials. I think that the biggest thing that it takes for a device to get adopted, like I've said, it is trust. People need to be able to trust that this device has followed the right process, it has been well tested, and it addresses a pain point. So in that situation, I think that once we reach these particular milestones with the manufactured product, they would definitely be and there would be adoption because there is a need.
So, Professor, bench test showed the stent can withstand more than 16 newtons of pressure. So, how significant is that in terms of safety, reliability, readiness for human use?
I think we've tried to sort of again, get those requirements, or I would say the needs identified based on the clinical use case. So
Mhm.
in this case, since the idea was to develop a device for use in the bile duct, we had to look up what are sort of minimum load bearing capacities that the device should have. And so when we made our prototype, what we did was tested it for its ability to withstand loads from various directions and so on.
You could change the materials properties based on the need. For example, the requirements for a vascular stent, a stent that is deployed in a blood vessel, may be quite different from something that is deployed in the biliary tree, in the bile duct, or the requirement of strength for say a plate that is used for fixing a fracture is completely different from we would require in the biliary system. So thanks to the precision of materials engineering that we have now available even to us thanks to the Institute of Science, we are able to fine tune these material properties to particular clinical use cases. So, as Professor Chatterjee had alluded, these measurements were done with the biliary tree in mind, but these measurements can be modified using the right combination of materials for different applications.
Sir, if you like to add, Professor Chatterjee?
Yeah, no, I think the point here is that we want to utilize our expertise in materials and fabrication to be able to fine tune these as per the requirements. Yes, we started off with the bile duct and the biliary stent in this case, but I think over the years in trying to do this R&D, we have learned a lot where we feel that this can become a platform technology that, yes, in future, if you had to fine tune this for a different use case, we should be able to, do this at a relatively shorter sort of turnaround times and come up with devices that could then be, better suited for other locations in the body. By that, I mean maybe somewhere you want it to be more flexible, sometimes you want it to be more rigid. So I think the idea is that now that we have sort of developed this first generation device, it will enable us to then cater to other needs, hopefully much faster than we were able to come up with this solution. So that's sort of our vision and our interest going forward.
Okay. Any concluding remarks from Dr. Sana and Professor Chatterjee?
I think that this was, I really valued, and I continue to value the partnership and the time that we've spent together because there's been a lot of mutual learning, and perhaps there are 2 points that I would like to make here. That expenditure in R&D at a government or at a public level is extremely important. And over the last few years, we've realized that there's been this entire influx or thought process that venture capital is going to fund this. But that's not actually the case. We do need expenditure or investment in basic research and development to be able to create products that work for Indians. And secondly, that we need more opportunities to collaborate such as the ones that we have created. And as again, Professor Chatterjee has said, this was very serendipitous because, IISc is in Bangalore, I'm in Bangalore. So we were able to interact at a much closer level than perhaps would have been ordinarily possible. But I think in the future, we probably need to create these clinician scientist pathways or mechanisms by which labs such as Professor Chatterjee's are able to work with clinicians such as myself, because that's probably the only way to actually grow science and grow the device requirements as per the needs.
So, Professor Kaushik, as Sir mentioned about collaboration, so I just want to sum up with this that if adopted widely, how much could it reduce hospital stay, repeat procedures, treatment cost?
I think maybe Dr. Asthana can maybe comment on that better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that certainly all I can tell you is that it would be significant because it is, as of now, I wouldn't be able to give you any numbers because for that we would need to do some actual trials, with and without. But very intuitively, if you're reducing multiple hospital visits, multiple admissions, and multiple procedures, you can see that the amount of not just the cost, but the amount of human misery that can be saved is significant.
Right, right. Right. So that was Professor Kaushik Chatterjee and Dr. Sonal Asthana speaking to ETV Bharat about a homegrown innovation that could transform post-operative care. With regulatory approvals and clinical adoption ahead, the Asthana stent may become an important example of how Indian science and surgery can jointly deliver practical healthcare solution. This is Dr. Anubha Jain from ETV Bharat signing off. Thank you so much.
Hi there, I'm Katrina Perry, and this is The Global Story. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the working world went through a revolution. Workers, particularly white-collar office workers, were ordered to work from home to stop the spread of the virus, and it seemed like a permanent change. Hybrid working has remained incredibly popular years after the COVID lockdowns were lifted. But now, more and more companies are ordering employees back to work. And many employers have slammed working from home as inefficient and bad for the bottom line. So, is the work from home revolution over now?